This talk revolves around issues in e-business payments, and there are other sessions, other classes that relate to this topic also. So, to start, we'll talk about Internet EDI. EDI is the electronic data interchange. Now, Internet EDI is an extension of EDI, utilizing the technology of the web. So we have EDI, which is the communication of information between companies in a format that each one can read and access, and it helps the companies to know what they're doing regarding orders and the status of orders, and they're able to communicate effectively in formats that they have agreed. So it's computer systems in one company talking to computer systems in another company and transferring the information efficiently between the two. Now, Internet EDI is an extension of this using the web. So EDI is the precursor of today's business-to-business electronic commerce. So when we talk about business-to-business, today's business-to-business may involve very sophisticated software, specialist software designed for specific functions, and so on. So EDI is what's gone before it. EDI is the precursor to that. EDI is what it's where it started, linking businesses together using applications, data applications in one, perhaps a database in one company, and the same database in another company, so that the information could be sent smoothly between both companies, one sending, one receiving, and it intelligible to the management in both companies. Traditional EDI uses proprietary networks and VANs, value-added networks, and operates similar to email. It stores and retrieves information. So EDI is a very straightforward system in some regards. It uses standard applications or agreed applications, perhaps agreed databases, and it sends the information from one company to the other. It can be opened and worked upon in the second company, and the information can flow between the two of them using this common standard. Internet EDI goes beyond the exchange of electronic documents, giving trading partners access to product specifications, availability, price, delivery tracking, payment details, and even direct delivery, as in the case of digital information, for example, software or MP3 downloads or whatever. So now the information flowing between companies can be very sophisticated. In fact, it can be as sophisticated as the managements wish it to be. So it can include a lot of information, the product specifications, which can be agreed online, the availability, the price, the delivery, tracking, payment details, and so on and so on. So it's a very detailed process. Internet EDI can now lead to the two companies not just having broad agreement, but very specific agreements on delivery, specifications, changes in design, changes in specifications, changes in prices or whatever. And this information is updated almost in real time. So the companies know exactly what's going on, and they can work together to produce the final product for the customer. So EDI uses public networks and benefits from a common standard of information sharing and exchange. It's a public network. It's using the internet. It's using the same system as public networks, and of course that makes it cheaper to use also, because there's nothing specialized about it. There's no specialist equipment required, or tied lines, or specific lines for communications put in between the two companies. This is using standard internet technology. It's secure and it may be encrypted at each end, but it's using the standard technology to transfer data between the companies. So EDI goes beyond, as I said, the delivery of just electronic documents. It can include a lot more. And the business model is shifting from supply chain to web chain. There is the physical chain, which is the components, the raw materials, the final products, which have to be moved. But the information flow that enables this to happen can now be conducted through the web using specialist packages still at each end, but at the same time ones which can be accessed easily by the management in both companies. So the supply chain has an information chain associated with it, and that information chain can be sent via web technology very efficiently, and it means communications is at a very high level right throughout the process. The common standard being used is open buying on the internet, OBI, open buying on the internet. This is a freely available standard that contains architecture, in other words, what's required to use it, what sort of hardware is required to use this, detailed technical specifications and guidelines, together with compliance and implementation information. So it's a set of standards. Open buying on the internet is a set of standards. It includes the type of hardware that's needed, the type of software that's needed, the agreements about the use of this and how the information should be packaged and sent, any compression packages that are used, any security packages that are used also, compliance and the implementation of information. So it's an agreement about how the information should be parceled up and sent over this public network. The OBI system delivers digital certificates using a particular protocol, the 509 protocol, and this of course further enhances its appeal. When it's using a certificate and both ends have access to the information necessary to open the data, it means it's more secure, it's private, it's using a public network, but the information itself is packaged up very neatly, and there is confidence in the use of the technology because it has the digital certificate associated. There are other business-to-business systems in operation or under development. What we're talking about here is, if you like, early days in companies collaborating and working online. But as you'd expect, even given the nature of the internet, I suppose, it doesn't stand still. There's constantly new developments, and there are new developments in this area. And really, our study of this needs to be updated on a very regular basis to ensure that we know exactly what's happening at this moment in time. There are all sorts of new technologies and new ways of communications that are creeping into business-to-business systems. The Bank Internet Payment System project will speed up interbank transactions and will be linked to the electronic funds transfer point of sales, EFT-POS. Again, as I said, these are initiatives that come into play in certain time periods, but they will be superseded by new initiatives. That is the way the world is. We tend to progress. We tend to move on. We find the errors and the mistakes and the limitations of a system, and we try to improve it. And out of that improvement process, we get a new system, which then becomes the standard. And again, we look for the improvements that can be made to that to further refine it even into the future. So we're constantly on the lookout for new and better ways of doing things. But the bank internet payment system that will speed up interbank transactions and can be linked to the electronic funds transfer point of sales system. Business to business electronic commerce shortens product and business cycles. When communications between businesses is at a high level, then business A, let's say, knows when business B is about to make a delivery of raw materials or components. They know in advance. The information has arrived in advance. The EDI system will have communicated that the delivery is about to be made. So the stores and the production and the dispatch and all of those different aspects of the business will know what's happening. There is certainty about the process, and they can be tooled up waiting to get going when the delivery arrives. So it means that the customer requirements is met at a speedier rate. The customers can be assured that the delivery date that they were given will be met. They can be assured if everything runs smoothly in the delivery and the other company sticks to what it said in its communications with the business. Business to consumer, the electronic payment system is usually stored value cards or e-cash systems. Now, let's have a few words about this, because business to consumer and the flow of information and the flow of communications here will be somewhat different. But in order to facilitate purchases and buying, value cards have been issued and e-cash systems. And again, as I said earlier, these are constantly under review, constantly being updated, constantly being changed, new products introduced and so on. So it's necessary to continually go back to find out what is happening today, because tomorrow the chances are it will be different. So let's talk about smart cards. These are a form of electronic payment system. They are plastic cards with a microchip that stores information, usually about value. The value on the card acts as a substitute for cash. For example, telephone cards are a basic form of smart card. Sometimes people carry a telephone card that they could just plug into a telephone to make a phone call using a public network, and they don't have to enter cash into the telephone system. Now that's quite an old-fashioned example, but I'm using it to say smart cards and the concept of smart cards have been around for a long time. A smart card is simply a card which stores information and can store units of credit, money if you like, and can be used for purchases. They're more than a value of money. They may hold personal information, such as medical information and general data about the user. So it's possible to store our blood group or our medical history, so that in the event of some incident happening, medics on the scene could use the smart card to get information about us, which will speed up the process of treatment. Smart cards are microcomputers that rely on a reader and external source of power to make them work. But really that's what they are. They're small microcomputers. they hold data and they can transfer the data so that it's understandable to the user through the use of external sources of power and an external reader. The chip has a typical input-output device. It's a microprocessor. It has a ROM, a read-only memory, and a RAM, a random access memory. So the ROM will set up the format for the information stored on the card. It'll organize the information perhaps into tables or whatever. And the RAM is what we put in about ourselves, what's programmed in about us, our name, perhaps our address, our telephone number, our blood group, our medical history, or whatever it is we want to store there. And that is entered onto the card. However, they're mainly used for the transfer of value and data without verification. And this distinguishes them from online payment systems. A smart card is quite acceptable in many areas. The card is swiped, or nowadays we could hover it over a reader using near field technology, and the appropriate sum is debited from the card. So it's quite an efficient way of making a payment. They use the following protocols. They are programmable, assigning serial numbers and loading keys to increase and decrease the value of the card. This is called personalization. So they can be, using the random access part of the memory, they can be personalized. We can reload the capability. We can, when we've spent the sum, the money which was loaded onto it, when that's spent, we can reload it again. So the card can be reused. A debit transaction process facility that enables and business systems to download the value. So it's a debit system. Once the card has been loaded with money, with a certain value, we can use it to make purchases. So the seller we're dealing with can debit the card, can take off the sum that's required and leave the balance on the card. The future use and acceptance of smart cards will depend on security, legal, social and political issues. There are many parts to the use of these cards. There are many obstacles to the use of the cards. They could also be used by governments as identity cards, which many people may think is an infringement on their privacy and on their human rights and so on. So it's a controversial area as well. It's not just using the smart card to pay for goods. It's the personal information that's stored on the card that may be controversial as well. Now, properties of digital payment systems. Well, the internet and the web for commerce is creating the need for another type of electronic payment system, digital cash. The widespread belief that digital cash would replace traditional cash has proved unfounded. We still use traditional notes and coins. Notes and coins are very flexible. They are very easy to use. They're generally acceptable. That's what makes them into cash. People have confidence in them. They're tactile. We can hold them and look at them and count them, and so there's a comfort almost in using traditional cash. So the systems we're talking about here, the digital systems, these are interesting and they are developing, but there's a widespread belief amongst many that traditional cash will persist. Early developers such as DigiCash went bankrupt, and CyberCash, well, that moved into other businesses, have highlighted the problems faced by pioneers in the area. it's difficult to get the technology widespread, so it's ubiquitous. It's available in every shop, which means the use of the cards is limited. And also, people have a resistance to using this. They like to count out money. They can physically see what they're spending. They can physically see what's happening. There are many people who like the idea of cash. So there are obstacles to the use of these systems, even though the use of credit cards and debit cards is widely acceptable. It's more widely acceptable. But these particular types of system, the smart card system, may be a step too far for many people. Digital cash is a string of encrypted digits or electronic tokens that can be used as a substitute for money to purchase goods in an electronic environment. They're particularly useful in the context of the internet. In fact, in terms of security, they are very good. If the smart card has a limited sum of money on it and it's used for purchasing online, then if there was any possibility of the transaction being intercepted and for crime to take place, the amount that the buyer stands to lose is the amount on the smart card. And that's preferable perhaps to using a debit card or a credit card. So it's the digital cash system could have some uses and may be used for that purpose. In fact, many people who use, not many, I suppose a lot of people who use the internet to make purchases may have a second credit card with reduced limits, just in case something goes wrong. They're not going to lose too much money. So that's widely used as a practice. Now, the properties of digital payment systems. Well, the problem facing the acceptance of digital money hinges on security, and 3 protocols have been developed for security of transactions over the internet. There's the STT, SEPP, and SET. So we have the secure transactions technology, we have secure electronic payments processes, and secure electronic transactions. Let's have a few words about each of these in turn and see what they mean. So we'll start with the secure transactions technology, STT. This was developed by Microsoft and Visa. It uses a 2-keyed authentication and encryption system that enables purchases using credit cards in a manner similar to offline credit card usage. Each user is authenticated by an electronic certificate or credential that is unique to them. So we have the authentication of users, and then, and only then, can they use the system to make purchases. And any transaction must be verified by the credentials that have been entered. So transactions are trackable back to the person who made the transaction. The secure electronic payment system, this protocol was developed by IBM and MasterCard and others, and uses existing credit card procedures. It differs from STT in that it uses other forms of communications and private networks as well as the internet. So this one is wider, has a wider scope. It uses the internet, but it can also use private networks and so on. So it's, again, a possibility. And a secure electronic transaction, or it was devised by Visa and MasterCard, establishes a uniform, secure communication standard for internet commerce. It uses the internet rather than existing EFT networks. It was called a wallet when it was approved first, way back in 1998. The idea of the wallet was that we would have a card and have some access credentials that we would use to gain access to the system, and or perhaps codes, for example, and into our wallet, into our electronic wallet, we would put some cash, and we would use the cash to make purchases. So very similar to what we were talking about in terms of smart cards earlier on. These three different types of approaches are interesting, but they may become historic. Clearly having three systems is not going to be very useful to many. So we like to have a common standard. We like to have one process. And really it all hinges around security, ease of use, confidence, these type of issues. And it's always evolving. There will be a time, I'm sure, when all the big companies will come together and agree a common standard, and when that is done, we will have more confidence in the use of this type of technology. There are new digital currency products, and the interest in these are for several reasons. Many like the anonymity of digital cash over credit cards. With a credit card, there is a tracking system, there is a payment. The credit card companies know what we're interested in, know the types of products, and know where we are and when we spend our money and so on. I personally see nothing very much wrong with that, but some people may like to be more anonymous and be able to spend their money and not be watched. But it may be a case, I'm not too sure. Secondly, access to credit cards may be a problem for some, particularly in developing countries. It may be difficult for some people to get access to credit cards, may be approved for credit cards. So the use of alternatives may be welcome. If they are widely accepted, easy to use, people have confidence in them and so on, they may be more acceptable. It's also the case that some people are too young to have credit cards. So if they wanted to have access to digital money to buy online, to buy music or books or whatever online, or they wanted to use it in shops to purchase or whatever, it may be that the use of digital cards may be a good alternative. So they simply use the card and make their purchases. Auctions and other sites may prefer digital money. It's very straightforward to use. The person makes the purchase and enters some details, and the transaction is complete. Their card has been debited, the seller's card has been credited by that sum, and the transaction is complete. So it's very straightforward. Merchants may prefer digital cash since it allows micropayments without incurring credit card charges. Credit cards make a charge for payments. Credit cards are in the business of making a profit, after all. So credit cards are not really suitable for small transactions, whereas these cards could be used in small grocery shops to make very small purchases. Credit cards can't be used really in shops for very small purchases. They're not designed for that purpose. Digital cash techniques include Other methods include the use of wallets, for example, Microsoft's Passport wallet, as I mentioned earlier, very similar to the smart cards, but a bit more dated now. The smart cards are still in the process of development, and we need to wait and see what the future is going to bring with these. When we discuss internet and internet technologies, it's very difficult to see where we're going. It sometimes moves at such a pace that it's almost impossible to keep up. But Microsoft's wallets doesn't seem to have been a big success, whereas the smart cards may be more acceptable. It's difficult to say. The Microsoft Wallet, well, it stores credit and details and shipping addresses. So we can put some information into it and make payments using it. It uses secure connections to online merchants. So it was trying to be as secure as possible. There are new protocols and techniques constantly being developed and tried. So it's whether Microsoft's ideas can come back with a vengeance and develop and become the market leader or not. Difficult to say, because the technology is constantly changing. The technology is improving, and customer requirements are also changing. Our expectations of what the cards can do, and the convenience of the cards, and security of the cards, and our confidence in the whole process. All of these things are changing all the time. But that's all I'm going to deal with in this session, so we're going to leave it at that. This has been a general talk about e-business, payments, and the different types of approaches to it. There are other classes in this area, so it's worth having a look at those and marrying this up with the material in those other classes. But that's all I'm going to do for the moment. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.